I'm Callum, 36, living in Brighton, England. I've been married to Tamsin for 10 years. For the first few years, our marriage felt effortless. We laughed, shared small moments, celebrated tiny victories. I wasn't a man who craved grand gestures or nightly fireworks. I just wanted the quiet warmth of partnership, someone who acknowledged your existence, who made you feel like your efforts mattered. And for a while, that's exactly what I had with Tamsin. She was vibrant, clever, magnetic even in her simplest gestures. I loved how she could make any room feel alive. I admired her ambition and the way she balanced her career with family. I thought we were a team, partners in every sense. But somewhere after year 7, things began to shift. At first, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. I noticed her checking her phone mid-conversation, laughing a little too long at messages I wasn't part of. Sometimes she'd come home from work, exhausted she claimed, yet she would scroll endlessly, tapping and chuckling at someone else's texts or social media posts. I brushed it off, told myself it was harmless. Maybe she needed an outlet. Maybe it was just a bit of harmless fun. I reminded myself we all need a release after long days. I stayed patient, thinking affection, patience, and love would eventually draw her back. One Friday evening, she went out with some colleagues from her office, promising me a quiet dinner at home when she returned. I waited, keeping things simple, cooking a modest meal, the aroma of garlic and rosemary filling the kitchen. I poured 2 glasses of wine and left them on the table, hoping for the gentle comfort of shared conversation. Hours passed. My phone buzzed. A message from one of her friends. Just a picture. Tamsin, sitting at a bar, laughing so hard with someone else that the room seemed to glow around them. I stared at it in disbelief. My stomach churned, but I didn't respond immediately. I stared at the wine, at the plates I had prepared, and tried to convince myself it didn't matter. The following morning, she returned home, hair slightly disheveled, eyes sparkling from laughter. I didn't ask. I didn't accuse. I thought maybe a conversation later, a moment when we could speak openly. But she skipped past the greeting, hung her coat, and flopped onto the sofa, still scrolling, still laughing quietly to herself. My attempts at small talk were met with distracted murmurs. I could feel the distance widening, stretching across our living room. My chest tightened with an unfamiliar tension. This was not the Tamsin I married. I began to notice the contrast in how she interacted with me versus how she interacted with others. A playful nudge became a side glance, a tender smile became a fleeting acknowledgement. She shared stories with colleagues over drinks that she wouldn't share at home. And one night, the unmistakable moment arrived. I was sitting in the kitchen, cleaning up after a modest dinner, when I heard her laugh, bright, unrestrained, the kind of laughter I hadn't heard directed at me in years. I followed the sound to the living room. There they were, Tamsin and a man I'd never met before, leaning close, sharing a private joke, a connection that excluded me entirely. They didn't notice me at first, absorbed in each other. My fingers clenched around the kitchen towel, knuckles white. My heart pounded, not with anger, but with a deep, hollow ache. The silence I had once craved now pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. I left the kitchen without a word. I went to our bedroom, closed the door, and just sat there, listening. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that perhaps it was a harmless friendship, that I was imagining intentions. But the more I listened, the more clarity crept in. She wasn't just distracted, she had chosen to exclude me. She wasn't sharing her happiness with me anymore. She was sharing it elsewhere. And after 10 years of effort, of loyalty, of patience, I realized something simple yet devastating. I was no longer part of her world. The next morning, I tried talking. Calmly. Carefully. I said, Tamsin, we need to talk. Her eyes didn't meet mine. She sighed, exhaled the kind of breath that carries disinterest and impatience, and said, About what? You're overthinking again. Her tone was light, almost dismissive, but it carried a blade I could feel cutting through years of patience. I opened my mouth to reply, but the words faltered. I realized that anything I said would be met with the same nonchalance. No understanding, no acknowledgement. Just the same laughter I'd heard the night before, now replaying in my mind. I thought about what I had invested in this marriage, years of compromise, work, support, care. I thought about every quiet effort I had made to preserve peace, to nurture connection, to be present. And I realized that Tamsin had made a choice. Not in malice, not necessarily with cruelty, but with a certainty that excluded me. That exclusion was loud, undeniable. The clarity of it hit me with precision. I had two options. Stay and continue to shrink in the shadow of her laughter with someone else, or reclaim my space, my dignity, my self-respect. I walked to the front door. I opened it. Tamsin, still perched on the sofa, noticed the movement. I didn't speak. I simply said, "I'm locking the door. You can figure your night out elsewhere." There was no anger in my voice, no demand for explanation. Just clarity, calm, and finality. I turned the key and felt a strange sense of release, a weight lifting that I hadn't noticed I'd been carrying. Walking away that night wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about reclaiming myself. The space I created was not empty, it was mine. I spent the night thinking, reflecting, not in fury, but in clarity. The laughter I had once associated with joy now became a marker of choice, of boundaries, of recognition of my own value. In the following days, I maintained the same composure. I didn't seek confrontation. I didn't retaliate. I allowed the distance to exist, to define itself. I realized that a marriage is not measured by shared history alone, but by mutual presence, respect, and acknowledgement. When those elements are absent, staying is not noble, it's self-erasure. Tamsin reached out eventually, messages filled with surprise, guilt, attempts at casual conversation. I responded with measured neutrality. I had learned that closure is not negotiated in the face of someone else's laughter. It is claimed through calm clarity, through recognition of your own worth, through a refusal to diminish yourself for the sake of another's amusement. That night, as I sat alone in my living room, I understood the profound lesson I had been resisting for years. Love does not exist in exclusion, in laughter shared elsewhere, in the hollow echoes of what was once intimacy. True respect, true partnership, requires presence. And when that is denied, walking away is not failure, it is clarity, it is strength, it is dignity.